Karen, I think we heard from you already in general, right? But not on the bill. So we'll give you 10 minutes to follow up on David, and then we'll pretty much be back on schedule, and we'll have 25 minutes for missing middle afterwards. So let's get started with David Hall. Welcome, David. Hope
Hi,
you
good morning.
hope you're well.
Thank you.
If we could go through as a 202,
It is indeed. Would you like me to share the screen?
please.
And I can do a very quick walkthrough. The bill is 4 pages long, so it's pretty brief. And then I can yield the floor to others in your discussion. So David Hall, Legislative Counsel. We are discussing S202. The bill is introduced, should be on your screen. The statement of purpose, the bill proposes to provide grants and other incentives to support creative sector businesses. And that's the whole point, is targeted grants to this particular sector. So there are findings and purpose sections here. I'm gonna, in the interest of time, I'm gonna skip over them. The findings basically say, this sector is really hard hit and still suffering. And the purpose, you'll see, is to provide $17.5 million in additional financial assistance to creative sector businesses and cultural organizations. So those four fall into buckets: direct financial assistance for COVID-19 safe equipment, marketing and re-engagement; 2, supporting statewide promotion and marketing of the creative economy; 3, funding for the Arts Council to implement the Create VT action plan; and 4, support creative sector businesses and downtown growth by investing in studio, art space, maybe some housing. So I'm on page 3 here, section 2. This is where the money flows, called the Creative Economy Recovery Program. So right now, this is couched as an FY22 appropriation, and it would be on passage, I believe. Probably would want to specify in this language now that it's from the state ARPA fund, and we are moving in a direction where we're adding to bills, sort of a verbal linkage between the harm suffered and the relief sought and the permissiveness under the act. So maybe you want to consider some additional language if you move forward with this. But it's 17.5 million of COVID monies. It goes through ACCD to the Arts Council to administer, consistent with this section. So the first piece is creative economy grants. So this is funding for creative economy grants to theaters, community art centers, galleries, museums, dance studios, similarly situated entities, and that's broken out into buckets. A, $10 million for a portion of monthly operating costs for businesses that have sustained losses due to the pandemic. That includes rent, mortgage, utilities, insurance. B is $2 million for public health related business and programming adaptations, including things like touchless ticketing, online sales, health and safety protocols. C is $4 million for public health related facility adaptations. So that includes things like air purification, hand sanitizer dispensers, expanding outdoor seating, HVAC assessments and upgrades, etc. So number 2 here is statewide promotion and marketing of the creative sector. That's $500,000 to support statewide and regional marketing of arts and cultural events, venues, and businesses. 3 is $250,000 to hire a Vermont Creative Network coordinator and zone leader. Those are positions for 2 years to implement that Create Vermont action plan referenced above. I'm sure you guys will hear more about that, but that's a plan that's already actually been prepared, but this is about the implementation through these positions. And then 4, art space and housing in vacant downtown storefronts. So this is $750,000 for creative spaces grants. And this is for vacant downtown buildings and other retail spaces, and to provide affordable housing, studio, exhibition, and performance spaces to Vermont artists. So it would be a competitive grant process. The business would apply for a 3-year grant to lease vacant downtown retail space. The grantee could use funds to lease residential space in the same building and to enable a landlord to make necessary improvements to the building to enable residential use. And there's a stipulation in C that the council would pay grant funds directly to the landlord after a lease agreement is executed. So that fourth is sort of a combination concept of downtown retail and artist space, but could have a residential component to it. This is actually effective here on July 1st of 22. So this needs to be updated, but that's the bill in a nutshell. And I'm happy to answer any questions if I can.
Just a technical question. How could the effective date be July 1st and have the money be used in the fiscal year 22?
Yeah, those would need to be synced up, as would again the language for the actual appropriation, and then also just making sure the date is right whenever you would want it to take passage.
Okay. Okay. Any questions for David?
Nice work.
Okay. Okay, good. I hope you can stick around for the next 15 minutes. Karen has an extra 5 minutes. I'm sorry, but now you got 15 minutes. And in terms of the theory and the justification for this bill, I thought I would leave those questions more to you than to David. So why don't you start with a presentation, and I'm sure there will be questions, but give us an overview of why you're supporting this bill and the need for the bill.
Thank you, Senator Sorokin.
Welcome.
Thank you, Senator Sorokin, and thanks for the invitation. Thank you, Senators. For the record, I'm Karen Middleman, Executive Director of the Vermont Arts Council. And first, I want to say thank you to Senator Clarkson for your leadership in sponsoring this bill, and to Senator Rom Hinsdale for co-sponsoring. We're delighted to be working with you. And I'm going to be brief because I'm sure you have questions. And I think the substance of this bill will actually come out in the questions, in my answer to your questions, but let me just frame it up for you a bit. So we composed this recovery package for the creative sector based on, first of all, the continued need that we're seeing, that we're hearing from the field, from both creative businesses and cultural nonprofits. And also based on our experience over the last 2 years, designing and implementing 4 COVID recovery and relief programs. One was in partnership with ACCD, as you know, and the last 2 were administering federal CARES Act and ARPA funds in partnership with Vermont Humanities. And I believe the committee has our reports on those, so I won't dwell on those, but happy to answer any questions that you have. The funding that we propose in this bill is focused on looking at this moment that we're in right now, with Omicron hopefully on the wane, but still causing substantial financial harm, and looking at what will it take to move the creative sector forward out of this immediate moment. What we're hearing across the creative sector is that a lot of businesses and nonprofits thought they were just getting steady again last fall, and then Omicron hit. There's been a deluge of cancellations at theaters and other venues just in the last month in July. And that means that there are production costs that these businesses have incurred for performances that will never happen. So they're not going to see any revenue. For a nonprofit cultural organization, they're also facing a lot of new costs to simply come out of the hibernation stage that they've been in for the last 2 years. So it costs money to reboot a dormant marketing campaign, to re-engage your customers and your audiences, sometimes to rehire staff. All of those costs were unbudgeted and unanticipated. So that's the moment we're in right now. The cost created by Omicron, audience hesitation and cancellations, and the new costs that come with rebooting and restarting and re-engaging audiences. That's the focus of our recovery package. Northern Stage in White River Junction is a great example of this financial picture that I'm talking about. From 2020 to 2021, their operational budget shrank by 45%. They were forced to furlough and eventually lay off 30 of 38 full-time employees. They were remarkably nimble, like so many cultural organizations, in adapting. I think many of you know they stood up a brand new outdoor stage in a lot adjacent to their building so that they could bring us together, audiences together for COVID-safe performances. There was a huge cost to our nonprofits, to all of the ways that they adapted creatively during the pandemic. They staged outdoor performances. They created brand new online content. They sent home art and craft kits with families so parents could keep their kids engaged. And they really helped so many of us to survive pandemic isolation. But in virtually none of those cases did they make any money. In other words, those were mission-driven activities, driven by the mission of these arts organizations and their intent to keep audiences and customers engaged and connected. They gave us all a sense of connection and a sense of being part of a larger community, but they didn't make any money doing it. So that's where we are now. The COVID relief grants that these organizations received were a lifeline, but they're looking ahead at 2022. Again, back to the Northern Stage example, when they're doing the budget that their board just passed, they're projecting a 33% gap in earned income in 2022. They built a budget based on an operating loss of nearly $500,000. And those numbers are consistent with the data that we're getting on the creative sector nationwide. I have a study there's some national data on market potential in the cultural sector that says we're not likely to get up close to pre-pandemic levels, to 2019 levels, until the third or fourth quarter of 2022. And I could choose any one of our anchor cultural organizations, the Latches, the Barry Opera House, the Paramount, and you'd hear a very similar story. So the funding that we're proposing in S202 is intended to be a bridge from this moment that we're in, where organizations and businesses are still struggling, to the other side, whenever that is. We know we're all building towards a time when we don't feel the impact of the pandemic, when audiences come back, when musicians and stagehands and graphic designers and exhibit builders can be employed again, but we are definitely not there yet. And frankly, our communities won't get there without your investment in the creative sector now. So that's, in a nutshell, the rationale for this bill. I'd like to talk a bit, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, about how we're approaching the actual grant formula for the creative economy grants, the largest portion of this funding. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, so the $10 million in operating support is meant to help organizations and businesses that continue to struggle financially with two kinds of costs. First, the fixed costs that don't go away just because a business is shuttered or a theater closes. So rent, mortgage, facility costs, security. And then also the costs that I mentioned to reboot and recover, rehire staff, reopen, bring to life a dormant marketing campaign, reopen an exhibit gallery that's been shuttered. And here's, the program is modeled on a very successful grant program run by the Colorado Office of Economic Development. And here's how it works. In order to be eligible, an organization or business would have to demonstrate loss of income or increased costs or financial harm due directly to the pandemic. And the categories of financial harm that we're looking at, by the way, come directly from the Treasury ruling. So all of the indicators of financial distress that are allowable uses of ARPA funds, those are the indicators that we're building into our grant program. They would need to supply a profit and loss statement pre-pandemic, so a 2019 P&L, a 3-year financial summary that lets us look at 2019, 2020, and 2021, an accounting of all their other pandemic assistance, and of course, evidence of good standing with the state of Vermont. Award amounts, once an applicant reaches a basic eligibility threshold, in other words, they've demonstrated financial harm due to the pandemic, award amounts are a flat amount based on the size of the applicant's cash operating revenue in 2019. So Colorado used a 7-tiered structure with, at the bottom, I would have to look at my notes, sorry. If you had an operating budget of up to $50,000, the grant was automatically $10,000. And at the upper level in the 7th tier, for budget sizes of 2 million and up, the grant was automatically 200,000. We've looked at right sizing this for our businesses and organizations in Vermont, and I think we'd use a similar tier, but stretch it a bit. I think we'd want to go from 5,000 at the lower tier to 250,000 at the upper tier. And I can talk more about how we arrived at those numbers if there's time, or I can supply that later in a memo. The applications are scored on an evaluation rubric based on 3 criteria: severity of pandemic impact and financial distress, community and cultural impact, and economic impact.
Okay, Karen, I think that, I mean, we have 5 more minutes
Okay.
left, and we're getting into more detail than we can today. I appreciate the detail, and believe me, I appreciate the thought of a more detailed application criteria for eligibility and grant awards than just simply lost revenue. So that's more targeted, and I think something that some of us on this committee are hopeful that we would get. But I guess I would like to, you have a bill that's setting the arts apart from everyone else. And I assume that if we pass this, your members wouldn't be also going to the Economic Recovery Grant or the VITA loan in addition to this. Is that something that is that a fair assumption?
So I have 2 answers, I think. First, we're agnostic on where the funding ends up, right? I mean, we're looking to make sure that the creative sector businesses and cultural organizations that we represent are well served by whatever economic recovery package the state puts together. If there's another economic relief program that ACCD runs that is right-sized for our applicants and meets the needs, the kinds of needs that I'm talking about, we'd be thrilled to have ACCD run it. We'd also be ready to partner with them to implement the grant program, as we did on the last recovery package for cultural nonprofits. However, I think what we all learned in that process is that those grants were not right-sized or well tailored to the needs of either a cultural nonprofit or a small micro business, an independent creative, a solo entrepreneur. And those are the folks that make up the bulk of Vermont's creative sector on the for-profit side. So what we're most concerned about is making sure that there's a relief program somewhere, whether we administer it or VITA administers it or ACCD administers it, that's right-sized to meet the needs that we are seeing in those groups.
So in your past experience with the prior programs, even though the grants were not right-sized, and putting aside the fact that you had a role in giving out the money, was it beneficial to the arts community that you had a carve out, or would you have been better served by just being part of the general program?
It was incredibly beneficial that there was a carve out. It allowed us to offer customized technical assistance to our grantees, and it allowed us to partner with ACCD to try to make the criteria better. As you know, there were many iterations of those grant criteria, and I feel like we got it better by round 3. Round 1, as you know, profoundly disadvantaged a lot of cultural nonprofits. So again, if we can write the language, I think the challenge that I wouldn't want to be in your shoes, because I think the challenge that you all have really in trying to design a one-size-fits-all recovery package is that one size just doesn't fit all when it comes to COVID recovery. And we're talking about a grant program that we're looking to design that's really customized for the needs that we know well in our sector. And I think that's an argument for a set-aside, because it addresses the needs head on that we're seeing in this very specific and very vital sector in Vermont's economy.
Yeah. Well, and I think we really are appreciating your focusing on that and designing something with such specificity for this sector. And I think this is well, needless to say, I think this is so well thought out, and your experience in the last 4 rounds of these, in the 4 programs you've had input in, is really helped inform this bill. And it was great to work with you on that as a result. your experience helped us design this. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Senator Brock, I have one question, but go ahead, Senator Brock.
Just a question. I'm supportive of this. I certainly believe that we do need to do more for the creative sector in Vermont. My question is, do you believe that the Vermont film industry is part of the creative sector that you're looking at?
I actually didn't hear you. That the Vermont film industry? Is that what
Correct.
Oh, absolutely. So film and media is a part of the creative sector. And we rely in our research and also in designing this grant program on standard industry and occupational codes, the NAICS codes and the SOCs that come from the federal government. And film and media are absolutely included in those industry codes when it comes to creative sector.
One of the things that I've been concerned about is that we have not devoted state efforts to bolstering the film and media industry generally since the Vermont Film Commission died a number of years ago. And there's another bill that I have that's pending in this committee right now that reinstitutes the Vermont Film Commission, but charges it with defining its mission much more closely with a view towards expanding the ability of Vermont to both attract more and also to support our industry. And I wonder, obviously not necessarily including funding at this stage, whether or not it would be useful to incorporate that bill into this bill as an addition.
Well, Senator Brock, my hope is that both this bill and your bill will be in the omnibus economic economic.
Yeah, we're doing this about that's fine. That's
And
fine.
when I say that, I don't mean in the final version, but at least for markup. So, so Karen, we're going to have to go, but I do have one overall question, and we will have you back. Is how, despite all the bumps in the road, and I realize, and thank you for acknowledging the difficult job we have, how has Vermont done in terms of getting money out the door and the amount of money proportionally compared to the rest of the country?
That's a good question. States are all over the place when it comes to aid for the creative sector. And there's some states that are doing a better job than us, especially states with large arts funds at the state level, like I'm thinking of California, New York. Connecticut actually has done quite well. Rhode Island has, as you may know, right here close to home, has done quite well in funding the arts, I think directly from the governor's budget. But it's all over the place. I think we've struggled a bit, if you want me to be quite honest. I think one of the things that's happened over the last few years, and largely due to the pandemic, is that we're all recognizing that the arts and the cultural and creative sectors are going to be vital to helping our communities bounce back. And so placing the creative sector really squarely in our sights when we think about what does it take for a community to recover? What does it take for Vermont as a state to recover? Is just critical. And I'm heartened, frankly, to be part of those conversations and to see that happening. So thank you. I appreciate the legislature's attention to the creative sector because we think our communities don't bounce back without it. So I appreciate this conversation very much.
It looks to me you have a lot of champions on this committee. So thank you. Thank you, David. We'll return to this. I want to move directly to Maura Collins, who's going to do some
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Introduction for us, some of her peers, to talk about the missing middle proposal that's floating around that the governor is very interested in supporting. So Maura, we have 20 minutes, I think, or maybe less, 20 minutes.
Okay. I think it's more important that you hear from Julie and Tom today. And so I will jump in at the end, just try to save me a few minutes so I can tell you about the progress VHFA has made on developing this program since I last saw you, as well as I have some, I don't want to call it proposed legislative language because I'm not a lawyer, but I have something that could go to David Hall to turn it into legislative language that maybe the clarity and provide the guardrails that this committee is looking for, that I don't think you've been given so far with what the administration proposed in just 2 sentences of budget language. So I'd be happy to talk about that, but I think hearing from Julie and Tom would be great for this committee.
Right, and can you save some time, because I'm not sure that Tom and Julie would be the right people on this, but your thoughts on concerns have been expressed on any kind of recapture or perpetual affordability on this housing. So if you can talk a little bit about that, that would be great. So who, between Tom and Julie, do you have a preference who goes first?
No, Julie's on the screen, so she can be
Oh,
up
yeah.
first. I didn't say, for the record, I'm Maura Collins with the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. Sorry.
We know who you are.
I know, but it's the rules.
Right.
Always.
Julie, welcome.
Thanks so much. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. Shall I just charge in?
Yeah,
Jump right-
introduce yourself in charge.
Yes, will do. So my name is Julie Ifland, and I'm the Executive Director of the Randolph Area Community Development Corporation, which for obvious reasons we call RACDC. RACDC is a nonprofit community development organization that serves the greater Randolph area. It's been working closely with VHCB and VHFA for nearly 30 years to create and preserve apartments, mobile homes, and service-enriched senior housing as well. We also manage the designated downtown program for Randolph and other community programs. So it's become inescapable to us that the demands for safe, affordable, and energy efficient housing of all kinds is a critical need for the low and middle income families of our region. As housing organizations, we're quite accustomed to answering calls from individuals asking for housing for their families, and that's pretty normal. But increasingly, we're fielding calls from employers asking about housing for their valued workers who are homeless, living in cars, and home insecure, and that's quite new for us. I want to talk a bit about our Salisbury Square project, which we believe can begin to fill our housing needs for affordable rental and single family homes that aren't just affordable, but an investment in forward-looking answers to community resilience needs. So Salisbury Square is located on 4.4 acres of the former Salisbury Furniture Company, which later became the Ethan Allen plant. And it's just 2 blocks west of Main Street. When we acquired the site from Ethan Allen, the buildings had been vacant for almost 20 years. And we wanted the redevelopment to reflect the values of the community. So we had public meetings, charrettes, surveys to ask them what they'd like to see at this site. And what people said they wanted was basically an updated version of the downtown neighborhoods that we already had and loved. They wanted this new neighborhood to be pedestrian friendly, to offer a mix of apartments and single family homes and affordable to a mixture of incomes, but they also wanted them to be very energy efficient, which is something our older housing stock, which is most of our housing stock, is not. So this was a pretty ambitious goal for a small community, but the site created a perfect location and the vision generated a lot of enthusiasm. So between 2007 and 2011, we cleaned up the entire site through the Vermont Brownfields program, built 14 affordable low-income apartments. And in 2013, we were asked to build the first single-family home for a couple that was eager to be closer to family. We weren't at that time ready to build out phase 2, but we said yes to sort of test drive our process and our documents and things. And that was the over 1,600 square foot, 3-bedroom Energy Star modular home with an attached 2-car garage and a full finished basement, which we delivered to them, including the land, for $285,000. That same home would likely cost double that today, if not more. The economic crisis that stalled the housing market put a hold on our original development plans for the second phase of the project. But as the market recovered, we also realized that we really had to take another look at the plan and the unit mix in light of the changing market needs and trends and the advances in energy efficiency technology, and to inject more common space into the design. So we're very excited about the new site plan and designs, and I've shared that so that you can see that if you care to look. The next phase would add at least 20 new all-electric, high-performance or net zero units. 12 would be 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, and 8 new single-family homes. These would be built with solar panels sized to provide the energy needed to energize, heat, and cool the homes, as well as to charge electric vehicle cars, or electric vehicles of various kinds.
Julie,
Meaning, yes.
Julie, I'm going to have to ask you to, because we only have like 10 minutes left for all
Oh,
the rest
sure,
of
sure, sure.
I'm
Well,
gonna-
let me
Can you
cut to the
tie it-
chase.
Can you
Sure.
tie it into the missing middle proposal as you know it?
Sure. So, we've struggled to make these affordable, to get these homes built, and we think it's in the best interest of our community to do so. So the gap filler is the essential ingredient in this for us, in that the existing programs to fund unit development are mostly tailored to rental. There are some for home ownership, but they frankly aren't enough to cover even a modest number in a given year. And the gap filling exercise, especially now when the prices are going up so quickly, is really the key for getting this and a lot of other, similar projects that people may want to do done. So we really support this concept. We think it's a fairly simple way to add to the mix of affordable housing tailored to home ownership development. And we think this would potentially get us over the threshold of this longstanding project. So we're really grateful to be able to talk about this with you, and grateful that you're looking into this new funding opportunity. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So is the subsidy in this program, in your mind, one to the new home owner or to the nonprofit?
It's really it's a gap filler between, as I understand it, it's a gap filler between the difference between the cost of the home and what the home owner can afford. So, there's usually a difference between what you can build something for and what it appraises for. We're used to that. But then there's also, the between what someone can afford at a middle income level. And frankly, if you look at the market, what's for sale in our market, those are gone largely. There's some fixer uppers, at lower numbers, but there's just nothing available that a middle income person can afford. And when we try to build them, there's always the gap. So it's partly to help us, fund the difference between what it appraises out at, or what it might and what it might cost, but also to get it to the point where someone in our community, a working person, can afford.
Okay. Any other questions for Julie? Thank you very much. Thank you for your service and your work.
Oh, thank you so much.
It's an exciting project.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
let's move on to Tom. Welcome, Tom. Sorry we're so pressed for time, but if you could do what you need to do in like 6 minutes, that would be great.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Tom Getz. I'm the CEO and owner of Summit Properties. We are a mission-driven private developer of mixed income housing based out of South Burlington. Just a quick overview of our company. We manage about 1,400 units of housing, most in Vermont, with some in New Hampshire and upstate New York. We have developed and managed the full gamut of housing, from single family, condos, independent senior. In recent years, sort of our bread and butter has been the ground up development of mixed income communities, leveraging low income housing tax credits and all the other affordable resources. 2 recent communities in Winooski, 39 and 45 units that have the market rate, the middle income, and then home apartments affordable to folks that are homeless and at risk. So we have a great pipeline and a really strong portfolio of this rental housing. We have been wanting for quite some time to be able to start developing some workforce home ownership housing, and the opportunities just have not been there because the resources have not been there for us to access the same way they are for the rental housing. And so I'll just, in the short time I have, give one example of a property we've been looking at. So for about the past year, we have been talking extensively with Middlebury College. It's one of many communities in the state that has a significant need for that kind of missing middle home ownership housing. We've got, they have a commitment to us. They're willing to help with the land. They want to make it work. They know how hard it is to deliver those homes that were, modestly priced, affordable to folks making 80 to 120% of area median income. That would be, $300,000 to $330,000 home. We finally identified a parcel of land. It's got every attribute you would want, that we would want to develop mixed income housing. It's got the location close to downtown, access to the transportation, potential to develop densely in a way that makes sense. But there's no way we can make this pencil out without some sort of subsidy. We've run the numbers every which way we can. And, a modestly priced home, it's going to cost us over $400,000 to build. And if these things are going to be affordable to folks at that income range, we need to be able to sell them at $300,000, $320,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. So as wonderful as this opportunity is, we can't make it happen without a program like proposed by VHFA. So I was really excited when I saw that this could actually be a possibility. The one thing I will end with is that, we have seen, we participate every year almost in the applications for mixed income rental properties. And the state, we've got an excellent mechanism for delivering that. And what it's resulted in is incredible competition for those resources. The state puts a lot of resources into rental housing, and you get amazing projects. I mean, it's always twice as many applications for rental housing as there are for, available resources. I know we're not the only ones in the state that have the same thought process, that if this resource becomes available, we're going to compete for it. So I think that if this, pilot goes forward, you're going to see intense competition and a lot of great projects. Obviously, I'm partial to ours, but I know that there's going to be a lot of great projects coming forward seeking this money. So happy to answer any questions. And thank you for the opportunity to speak briefly.
That was great. And you stayed within the time frame. Amazing. That's wonderful. Okay, any questions for Tom? We may call upon you again, Tom, as a resource to the committee. Okay, Maura, at least 5 minutes.
Okay.
You know the drill.
Buckle up. I'm going to go fast. Hi,
Okay.
I'm Maura Collins with Vermont Housing Finance Agency. I appreciate another chance to talk to the committee about this program. Last time I was before you, I think I also had 5 minutes. And I heard in there some concerns that this program isn't well enough defined or developed. And so I'm here with 2 things to offer to address those, that reflection. First, I want to explain to you what VHFA staff has been working on as we continue to build out this program with hopes that you all will support it. That includes drafting a subsidy covenant to protect the public investment in the homes that are assisted. We've been talking a lot with mortgage lenders about how we can ensure that conventional financing is going to be available to the homes that are created through this program. That'd be a deal breaker for everyone, obviously. So we need to protect that. We've built an application based on the application that we used for the state's homeownership housing tax credit program. And that includes looking and adjusting the budget and the project pro forma to accommodate this builder subsidy design. We've also started drafting a policy document that covers who are eligible applicants, such as how do we ensure that all the transactions are arm's length, defining home eligibility, such as
You're frozen.
Okay,
Oh, no.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
And considering price per square foot limitations. We're trying to define the level of review of builder plans and specs and when that review would come into play. That's going to be important to people like Tom Getz. He won't want to invest a ton in specs and designs too early until he knows that he's going to get funding through a program like this. So we're working through that. Similarly, deciding on the timing of the builders' budgets and wrestling with how do we handle inevitable cost increases and working through the specific resale mechanics, such as if the home itself must remain affordable or if the subsidy, if the home appreciates so much that it's unlikely that a new buyer could be under the income threshold and afford that home. Could those how do we get those subsidy funds to be paid back into a pool of funds so we can recycle them and help another home? And for example, we want to leverage existing programs though. So if we're talking about a nonprofit developer, if this is a shared equity home, if this is a tax credit supported home, we will probably just defer to those programs because they have those mechanisms built in. I'm really focusing on builders and developers of housing without other subsidies or additional oversight. VHFA is a compliance monitor and regulator. And so we need to make sure we've built that in to that all this is covered. But additionally, I can appreciate that the legislative language itself needs to be more prescriptive than, frankly, the 2 sentences the administration proposed as part of the BAA and budget. And we would welcome the clarity that I think you're seeking in terms of ensuring that we're all on the same page about the goals of this program. Again, VHFA is a regulator, and it's really helpful to us if we can point back to some statutory language. And so what I've done, and it's in pages 2 and 3 of the attachment I just barely sent to Scott before I got on, I've submitted some language for you to consider that is built on the homeownership tax credit program that has been so successful since 2009. You know, we've done $14 million and helped over 450 homes with that. I'm not a lawyer. So the language I'm suggesting is really fodder for you to potentially hand over to David Hall to consider as a starting point. But it really adds in considerable additional considerations to ensure that the program awards projects that are in alignment with the state's housing policies, such as smart growth, deep affordability, diverse geographic areas, and more. I'd be happy to come back and discuss that next week because I know you're short on time, but I wanted to make sure you had that now if that was helpful in your work.
Great.
Okay, so it'd be helpful for your fodder, as you say. You've gotten that over to David at this point?
No, I sent it to Scott and it's up on your committee website.
Okay, so we'll ask David to start turning that into legislative language. We're going to put everything in, and some ideas will just have a bulleted description and a section number and to be further developed. It sounds like this one where the administration may have been in their BAA language, you're further along. So hopefully we'll see some more parameters. But thank you very much.
May I say one final thing, if I may?
Yeah.
My final sentence is, I can appreciate that I haven't had a lot of chance to talk about this program with a lot of time. And I regret that you're being left with the misimpression that the program's not far along. I'm actually on the other side of the coin. I kind of need my staff to stop working on it if this isn't going to go forward. And I'm not threatening. I'm not saying that I'm at that point today. We're going to keep going. But I can't tell you how many, the hours of time talking with bankers, builders, developers. We were on with the Home Builders Association for over an hour last night, talking with the realtors and everyone. There has been so many hours, scores and scores of hours put toward this, talking with folks. And I think you're not seeing all of that in the time that we've had in the committee. So I welcome an opportunity to sort of bring that forward into more light if there's a chance.
We will bring you back and we'll make you first on the agenda next week. Okay.
We would appreciate that. Thank
Okay.
you, Maura. And we appreciate the additional work. Really great.
Thank
Great.
you. We're on the floor in 1 minute.